Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the running backs in terms of fantasy college football. This segment, we transition to the wide receivers. Very excited about this one as well. We have a lot of high-profile picks for this fantasy college football season, so I'm really excited to look at them. So without further ado, let's get right into it. At number 10, a really interesting guy out of Hawaii, true freshman last year in Pofeli Ashlock with 832 yards and 9 touchdowns as a freshman. I really think this is a very interesting pick in the top 10 because of the fact that he plays for Hawaii, but I really think it's benefited from the QB he has, Braden Shager, 5th all-time Hawaii passing leader, a school that has such good QBs, like Timmy Chang and Colt Brennan, so not bad for him. A very experienced player throwing to this young Pofeli Ashlock. So I'm really excited to see how this young receiver develops, and he could be a steal for fantasy leagues everywhere. So I'm really excited about him. Coming in at number 9, kind of a guy we've already talked about on the show because we talked about USF a lot, but Sean Atkins. He had 1,054 yards last year, 7 TDs. Really excited to see him continue that partnership with Byron Brown, a dynamic QB for USF. And USF, honestly, is not going to be one of the best group of 5 teams. They're not going to be looking to the 12-team college football playoff. And so I think that Sean Atkins could be a steal. He's not a high-profile name like some of the other guys on this list. So if you're looking for someone who people might overlook due to the fact that he's at a group of 5 school, look for Sean Atkins. Coming in at number 8, we have Joey Hobart. 895 yards, 8 TDs, another group of 5 player. I think that Joey Hobart, in terms of as wide receivers go, he's not as prominent as some other guys on this list, much like Sean Atkins, but look for him to continue to produce. He is such a high-level player. I think that he will be a high prospect on this list. So I'm really excited to see what he does. But coming in at number 7, a guy who is entering a very wide open wide receiver core for an Oregon team that looks very exciting. Tez Johnson, the first of 2 Oregon wide receivers on this list. You can probably guess who the second one is going to be. But Tez Johnson is going to have one of the best QBs in recent years in college football, and Dylan Gabriel throwing to him, transferring in from Oklahoma. So Tez Johnson, last year, his stats were 1,182 yards, 10 TDs. Look for them to inflate. Look for him to be off boards early, along with a guy who's coming up later in this list. I think that Oregon's going to have one of the best wide receiver groups in the country, starting off with Tez Johnson, moving into that number 1 role, taking over from Troy Franklin, who is off to the NFL. So I'm really looking forward to how Tez Johnson looks this year. Coming in at number 6, we have another kind of low-profile guy in Jalen Royals of Utah State. Jalen Royals had a great year last year, 1,080 yards, 15 touchdowns for him. But I also think this is one of those guys who benefits from new QB. Bryson Barnes comes into Utah State, transferring from Utah, obviously thrust into the spotlight for Utah last year after Cameron Rising's injury. Started most of their games, had some huge wins. So I really think that it helped his confidence last year. He's still a very erratic guy. He had 13 picks last year, only 17 touchdowns. But coming into Utah State, I really think it helps to have a guy of Royals caliber to help him transform into a quarterback who started out at a high-profile level and is now moving to a lower-level school without much pressure. So I'm really looking forward to that wide receiver QB duo. But coming in at number 5 is a guy who a lot of people might not know at a school that's more known for basketball than football, if you ask me. Rookie White of the UNLV Runnin' Rebels. Now, like I said, if you think of UNLV, you think of 90s basketball, Jerry Tarkanian. You don't think of football. But I think that's all going to change. Before we go into why I think that, let's go look into his stats. 1,483 yards and 8 touchdowns. And I think that The reason why Ricky White is ranked so highly is because there's now excitement in the QB room of UNLV. They get a very high-profile prospect from Lake Travis, a kind of pipeline school from high school to college for a lot of college QBs. And this guy is very exciting. Bo Edmondson comes into UNLV, the number 25 pocket passer and number 27 pocket passer for ESPN 300. Out of the class of 2023, he had 4,767 yards in his high school career, brings that production to UNLV, and I think having a receiver in Ricky White will just make his transition that much more easy. I'm really excited to see how a lower profile guy like Ricky White progresses. Look for him to be a steal in fantasy college football. Coming in at number 4, our second Oregon wide receiver on this list, transferring in from Texas A&M after not really being as high profile of a player as people thought he would be. Evan Stewart, kind of a player who failed in the Jimbo Fisher era at Texas A&M, wants a new look, goes and transfers to Oregon. Only 514 yards last year, 4 TDs. Look for that number to rise because he now has an established QB in Dylan Gabriel at Oregon with him. Like I said before, Oregon's looking to be one of the best wide receiver cores in the country. And Evan Stewart, look for him. Still only a redshirt sophomore, so he has a lot of years left in him to be the player that a lot of people thought he was going to be at A&M. So I'm really excited to see how he looks in an Oregon Ducks jersey this year. Coming in at number 3, another guy who's kind of a lower profile, Torrey Horton of the Colorado State Rams, 1,136 yards, 8 TDs last year, and I really think this is kind of reflective of how a young QB in Braden Fowler-Nicolosi is going to progress. Last year, Braden Fowler-Nicolosi kind of came onto the scene as a guy who was very erratic, had a lot of yards last year, but also a lot of turnovers. He wants to improve on that, and Torrey Horton can help him in that area there. Look for Colorado State. While they're going to lose a lot of games, I think that this QB wide receiver duo is a very intriguing storyline to look out for. Look for Torrey Horton to be a steal at number 3 in fantasy college football rankings. Coming in at number 2, a guy who you've definitely heard of, maybe not as much as you would like, but still a very high-profile player out of the SEC in Luther Burden. I really love Luther Burden. One of the most underrated 5-star recruits in my opinion, mainly due to the fact that he picked Missouri over other high-profile SEC schools. 1,212 yards last year, 9 touchdowns, and him and Brady Cook are looking to be one of the more underrated QB wide receiver duos in the SEC. I love Brady Cook as well. I love this Missouri team. They're definitely looking to break into the 12-team college football playoff, maybe not as the SEC champion because they have other teams like Georgia and Texas above them, but I really love this Missouri squad, and I really love Luther Burden. Like I said, still very underrated in my opinion because a lot of you may not have heard of him out of Missouri. So look for him to go early off of fantasy draft boards now that you know about him. But I'm not certain he's as good as this guy who's number 1 on the list, who I'm really, really excited about now that he moves to the Big 12, and that is Tetairoa Macmillan. What a monster of a player he is. 1,402 yards last year, 10 touchdowns, moving into the Big 12, a conference where points will be scored in bunches. Look for him to be one of the most exciting wide receivers in that Big 12. Obviously, looking at his quarterback in Noah Fafita, freshman last year, who came into Arizona, totally revitalized the culture of the program. I'm really excited to see Arizona in the Big 12, along with all these teams that are going to look to take them down a peg. Can Kansas State do it? Can Oklahoma State do it? I don't think so. I'm looking at Arizona as my favorite for the Big 12, and the reason why is Noah Fafita could have a breakout season, a Heisman Trophy candidate in my opinion, all because of this guy, Macmillan, right here. I think he's one of the preeminent wide receivers in college football. Expect him to be the first wide receiver of fantasy draft boards come draft time. But that will just about do it for my fantasy college football wide receiver rankings. Coming up next on my show, for the first time ever, we are talking fantasy baseball. mid-season roundup. Should be very exciting. I'm very excited to talk about a new sport that doesn't get featured a lot on the show. So tune in. We will be right back.